So this channel isn't even an hour old yet, but I wanted to put out one last video just to get into practice, get an idea of what the hell I'm doing here. And there was one thing that I did want to talk about. I wanted to discuss lunch. I know, I'm a guy who looks like he enjoys himself a good lunch, but bear with me here. Because I was looking back on my life and I noticed a really interesting trend, or something that can be studied throughout my life from childhood to now. How lunchtime has evolved. I know it's a weird idea, but I'm full of them. So yeah, that's why you're here. You're getting weird ideas. So when I was a kid in elementary school, lunch was kind of a free-for-all in that you could basically sit with almost whoever you wanted. It was not very cliquey yet. I mean, there are a few little groups in there and stuff like that, but yeah, it was pretty much a roulette wheel of who you were going to be sitting with. Like, obviously, I had, like, some key friends. I usually had one or two, like, main friends at a time. But aside from them, you could pretty much just sit at any table, and then you just start chatting it up, and you pretty much just fall into a conversation somewhere. I mean, what do kids talk about? Toys, TV. It's been a while since I was a kid. Honestly, it's kind of a mental block where I don't remember my childhood super well. Like, I'd say my memory is very strong until midway through high school. Then anything behind that, I kind of just forget. But yeah, I remember lunch at elementary school pretty much just being a random conglomeration of kids. And the reason why I laugh, I remember a kid throwing up once, and that was really funny. But what I'm trying to say is it didn't really matter who you sat with. No one was really particular about, oh, I have to sit with this person, or I must be with these people. You get where I'm going here? And that takes you into middle school, and even then, it's not quite there yet. Like, yeah, there are cliques, there are people who sit together religiously every single lunch. But even then, you'd sit at a table, and you still weren't too sure who was going to show up. Sometimes it would be your best buddy, it would be a friend of a friend, or someone's uncle's brother's kid, and who you've never seen before. But still in middle school, it was pretty randomized, at least for me in my experience. And I should preface, I never had a group of friends, for the longest time at least. So again, like one or two people, if they're there, great. If they weren't there, I'd have to figure something out. But I could still probably just sit with someone and you'd be fine. Now that takes us into high school, and that's where things get interesting. High school was an interesting time. I will get into detail on that another time on this channel. But when it came to lunch, I sat alone. I sat totally alone, had my own table every single time, by choice. I didn't care. All the friends I had, like there was a great amount of people, in elementary school, in middle school, they largely dissolved. If they did make it up to high school, maybe our periods didn't align. Wait a second. Our classes didn't align. That has a little more context there. So basically what school does, at least grade school, is it shakes the mold around during multiple stages. And you're either part of a group till the end of time, or you just get thrown off. Or you're a third option. I was a third. And the third is when you basically decide you don't want friends, and you'd rather just be on your own, do your own thing. So for me, during every lunchtime, during every study period, I'd always have my own table, very rarely interrupted, unless there was like someone who was trying to piss me off or something like that, or someone was like, hey, you want to join our table? I'm like, go away. Which did happen a few times. But yeah, I'd just be sitting on my own, like, eating, because that's what you're supposed to do at lunch, and then also poking at my phone, even though you weren't allowed to. Also drawing's another, big part of my life. There it is. But yeah, I made the conscious choice to sit on my own. I can't recall exactly why. I guess I really just didn't want anything to do with anybody else, for, again, reasons I will discuss another time. But that brings me into college, and this is the main point that I wanted to discuss. College was very much, at lunch, a social experiment. Because it was a pretty big place. Like, we had this main area called the student center, right? I guess every college has that, where it's the main hub, if you will, where everybody passes through there for one reason or another, get their mail, get their food, meet up with their friends, or maybe their parents have to drop in and they need a certain landmark to, like, say, hey, parents, I'm calling you on the phone, go visit me at the student center. It's right in the middle of the campus. And then you go there. So, like every college has its main hub. The student center was ours. And at the student center, that's where most people got their lunch. Whether you, have a card, you have money, whatever it is. And then, of course, you have the seating area, the cafeteria, as it's typically called. I don't know what took me so long there. But it was distinctly divided, not just in thought, but physically divided into two sections. You had one section where it was the main, rectangular tables, the standard repetitive chairs that are all exactly the same, and there was the other section that was kind of literally segregated by a hallway smack in the middle of the building. And over there you had it was a weird setup. It was like booths, you had stools that you could throw around and stuff. You had like a conference area that was also doubled up as an additional lunch area when it wasn't being used for meetings and stuff like that, or speeches, or whatever my college was doing. I didn't get involved. And the reason why I mentioned these two distinct areas, one that's very regimented and one that's very scattered, is that, okay, interesting that a college would design it that way, but what's more interesting is how people filled up those places. In the regimented area, with the, again, rectangle tables all lined up, same with the chairs and stuff like that, that's where all the normies went. That's how you kind of horribly call them. The neurotypical folks, that's where they went. The cliquey people, the people who have a group, they're part of a sports team, or part of cheerleading, lacrosse, whatever, or debate team, whatever have you, right? Or part of some club, they're part of some group. And they all consistently choose a table. They sit there every single day, and they've got their place. There's like no fighting or anything. Like they get their table, they sit there, they plant there, they got their group, and they're good. But then you get to the more scattered area, and you know who gathered up in that area? People like me. People who were neurodivergent. Like naturally, people seem to just instinctively funnel into either the neurodivergent side of the lunch area or the neurotypical side of the lunch area, where you're more social. But if you weren't part of that social demographic, and you were just on your own or whatever, like you were a loner like I was for a time, or you were neurodivergent, you would naturally, like no one told you to do it, you would just instinctively go to the scattered area of the cafeteria, which has always fascinated me. And that's how I met my friends at college. Would you believe it? Like, we naturally gravitated towards each other and became friends. Not because we were neurodiverse, mind you. Not because I was autistic and someone else had ADHD. That's not why we became friends. I'm like, hey, I'm autistic, nice to meet you. And then someone else is like, hey, I have ADD, pleasure to meet you. Whoa, what was that? Like, somehow this area of the cafeteria is where the neurodivergent people converse. That's where they went and found each other. It was just such an odd phenomenon, very distinctly different from elementary school, middle school, high school, where it was more scattered, more random, more of a free-for-all. At college, it became regimented, but not because anyone deemed it to be so. Like, in elementary school, you had, like, those angry, like, I don't call them lunch ladies, but, like, just these angry old women, like, marching around the cafeteria telling you, you sit there, you stay away from that kid, you talk too much, shut up, you're ugly. And then in middle school, it's kind of the same thing. You got those people just wandering around, maintaining control and whatever. And then in high school, there was no control. I remember vividly the day where a girl ripped some other girl's hair out. That was a lot of fun. Then you get to college and no one cares, right? And people just naturally fell into their groups. I keep using the word naturally, but that's a word here. And like, people just fell into, we're all part of the same sports team. We're going to sit on this side of the cafeteria. And then we have, I don't know anybody, and I got some weird thing in my head. I'm going to sit over here. And it was just a beautiful thing. The fact that there was I wouldn't want to call it a divide, because that makes it seem like it's a bad thing or it's a derogatory thing. Like, no one was being forced to sit on one side or the other side. Again, we naturally, I say the word again, chose to sit on one end of the cafeteria or the other. Like, if you had a neurodivergent person like myself, and for some reason I wanted to sit on the more regimented side of the cafeteria, I could do that. I've done that before. I could just go over there, got my own table, be on my own lonesome. Like, even if I got sick of my own friends for whatever reason at the time, I could just go over there and I'm like, okay, I'll be safe here. I don't have to talk to them. I got my own place. And none of the cliques are going to talk to me there because they've got their own friends. They're too busy, and there's no riffraff, really. At least at my college, there wasn't a lot of riffraff that I saw anyways. And then you get to the other crazier dirty side of the street, as I guess I could call it, where you get the wild cards, right? And then they all have their own agendas. They all have their own like curfews and ideas and fantasies that they're like drenching themselves in head to toe in, and that's what they're focusing on right now. So that's where you get all the artists, you get all the directors, all the eccentrics, all the shifty weirdos, and people who can't go 5 minutes without napping. Like, that was a place to be. That was a place where I met some of my best friends ever. Granted, they're not all here now, but just the fact that I had known them is so special. But again, it's weird because we wouldn't have met each other if we weren't somehow just gravitating towards a specific area in the cafeteria where our paths would cross. So I don't know, what does that say about humanity? Just the fact that, like, when there are distinctly people going around doing population control, it's more chaotic. But when you don't have those people, like with those batons or those rulers, whatever, like directing everyone where to go and stuff like that, when you don't have those people, then everyone else, that's when it's most peaceful. Isn't that weird? Then people can have total liberty to decide, I'm going to sit with that group, or I'm going to sit on my own, or I'm going to sit with these random maniacs and see what happens, right? And when I say maniac, I don't mean, oh, we're destructive, we're chaotic, or anything like that, but, like, we're just totally fringe, we're out there, like, that's how I described my friend group at the time. Or friend groups. I had 2 friend groups, which is really interesting, like, one pre-COVID, one during COVID. So that's, again, a story for another time, perhaps. But yeah, basically the conclusion I'm drawing from this lunch thing that I'm talking about is the less order you put there up front, the more chances that order will arrange itself on its own within the masses. Do you agree with that? Like, is this a proper example that proves that theory? Again, to summarize, elementary school, middle school, high school, everyone was being guarded. As a result of that, fights broke out. You never knew who you were going to sit with. It was always randomized. Then you get to college, the second situation, where nobody's watching anyone, and everyone naturally gravitates towards their group, or they naturally gravitate towards just being on their own, and nothing happens. Like, in all of lunch, I can't remember anything crazy happening at college. Except for one time where a mouse was running around, and that freaked out a lot of people, which I enjoyed a great deal because I was really far away. But yeah, think about that. Let me know what you think in the comments. It's interesting. The fact that we found our own people because no one was trying to help us or tell us what to do. That suggests that we have our own insurgency in there, and we just need to be given room. Or maybe we developed that insurgency because there were people looking over us to begin with, and that gave us a better understanding of who we'd want to hang out with in the future. So by the time we got to college and we were mature, then that's when we were able to decide, I want to be on my own, or I want to be with this group, or whatever, etc., etc. Like, maybe you could take elementary school. Would it indeed be raining chaos if there was no one looking over all the elementary schoolers? I'm guessing probably. But in the case of a thought experiment, if you got rid of all those angry lunch ladies, they were angry, I don't know why, then would the elementary schoolers be naturally inclined to peacefully, sit with their friends at their tables, like we see in the future, like a decade later plus, in college? That's interesting to me. Or maybe it's just simply based on the fact that when you go to college, you got people who are studying the same thing, they're more intent on learning, and in the previous grade schools, you need someone to mediate all the riffraff that's going on, because you have people who don't want to be there and want to have total havoc. And I've seen that, and I've enjoyed it. I enjoy chaos from afar, I'll admit that. But let me know what you think. I don't know. Just an interesting story to tell. I'm full of them, so stick around.